In any conversation, you're being watched about half as closely as you think you are. That comes from a famous 2000 study at Cornell, where Thomas Gilovich and his team asked people wearing a deliberately embarrassing t-shirt to estimate how many other people around them noticed that t-shirt. The wearers guessed around 50%. The actual number was closer to 25%. The spotlight we feel on ourselves is roughly twice as bright as the one anyone else is pointing at us. In conversation, this turns into something painful. You're at a dinner, you've said your bit. The room pauses for half a second, and in that half a second, your brain has already decided that everyone else is now waiting for you to say something else, to follow up, but you have nothing else. And now you should probably start planning your exit 3 minutes into the dinner, maybe 4 on a good night. The problem isn't that you've run out of things to say. The problem is what's happening inside your head between those things you're saying. We treat running out of things to say like it's a content problem, as if there's a finite amount of topics inside of you, and once you've worked through them, well, that's it. But your brain isn't running out of material. It's generating material constantly and rejecting almost all of it before it gets anywhere near your mouth. You're not standing at an empty fridge, you're standing at a full one, deciding nothing in there is good enough for you, and then announcing to the kitchen that there's nothing to eat. The problem isn't the speaker, it's the editor. The editor is brutal, too random, too obvious, too personal, oh my god, too boring. It wants the perfect comment, not just a good one. And by the time it's finished filtering, the moment's gone, and you're left looking at the salt shaker like it might say something to break the tension. The good news is that editors can be retrained. They can't be fired though, which is unfortunate to say the least. Over the next few minutes, we'll look at why your conversation editor is so aggressive, where you should actually be sourcing your material from, and a few small shifts that make conversations feel less like an interview you didn't prepare for, and more like something you can actually sit back and enjoy. There's also a counterintuitive idea in Chapter 3 about why your instinct to change topics when a conversation slows down, well, why that's exactly wrong. It genuinely reframes how the whole conversation works, but we'll get to that later on. This is simple stuff, simple explanations for everyday things. Chapter 1, the editor in your head. Back to that Cornell study for a moment. Gilovich and his team called the phenomenon the spotlight effect. We systematically overestimate how much other people are paying attention to us. The t-shirt experiment is the famous version, but the same research team ran a separate study on a group of conversations and found the exact same pattern. People overestimated how much their comments stood out to the rest of the group by roughly the same factor. Half of what we think is being clocked and judged as strange by the people around us simply isn't. We've all experienced this in a conversation before. Your brain assumes everyone is meticulously evaluating every word you say, weighing it against some invisible standard. So when a thought arrives, oh, hey, that reminds me of something, your editor immediately runs through threat detection. Is this interesting enough? Will they think this is weird? Is this the right moment to say that? By the time it's done checking, the conversation has moved on. Your thought, which was perfectly fine, even great, has been deleted and unsent. Picture a HR department inside your head, reviewing every sentence before you're allowed to say it. By the time the paperwork clears, the meeting's over and everyone's gone home. It's bureaucracy gone wrong. Imagine this situation. Someone tells a story at lunch and you have a comment that would land. Funny, relevant, true. But you don't say it. In fact, you think about it for about 2 seconds too long. Someone else jumps in before you say it. The window closes. The conversation moves on. Half an hour later, walking back to your desk, you're still thinking about what could have been. You tell yourself that next time I'll say it. Let me tell you, there won't be a next time. Sounds kind of morbid. You're not like dying, it's just the conversations don't often repeat. Anyway, I'll move on. Here's the genuinely freeing bit. Most people aren't sitting in judgment of every word you say. They're too busy doing the same thing to themselves. The other person's editor is also working overtime, rejecting their own thoughts, worrying about their own pauses. The spotlight you feel on yourself is mostly just the one you're holding. And it goes deeper than that. Even when people are paying attention, they don't actually want the polished version of you. In a classic 1966 study, the social psychologist Elliot Aronson identified what's now called the pratfall effect. Capable people are treated as more likable after a small blunder than before it. Let me repeat that again. Capable people are rated as more likable after a small blunder rather than before it. It's the minor stumbles that humanize you. It's the polish that creates distance. So the half-formed comment your editor is desperately trying to suppress, it isn't the problem to be avoided. It's the thing that would actually make the conversation work. The editor isn't just overcautious, it's making you less likable, not more. You've already felt what conversation is like without the editor. Think about your closest friends or your family, the people you never seem to run out of things to say around. Your editor barely runs there. You say half-formed things, obvious things, slightly dumb things, and the conversation just keeps going. In fact, it's often more interesting. With strangers, the editor goes into overdrive. Same person, same brain, just a different threshold. The fix is to lower the threshold. Say the half-formed thing, say the obvious thing, say the slightly off thing. The perfect comment is a myth, it doesn't exist. And waiting for it is what makes the conversation feel impossible. A good enough comment, said now, beats a perfect one delivered to the inside of your own head. One practical version of this is what some people call the 3-second rule. When a thought arrives, you've got about 3 seconds to say it before your editor catches up and starts filtering. After 3 seconds, the moment is usually gone. So don't analyze which version of the thought is best, just grab a half-decent one and say it. Once you've calmed the editor, there's still a second problem to fix, because most of us are looking for material in completely the wrong place. A quick note here before we get to chapter 2. I'm actually quite a small independent channel here, and I'm just trying to help as many people as I can on YouTube. So if you have a moment to subscribe, like, comment and share, that would mean the world to me, and I'd really appreciate it to spread this word around to more people. Let me know down in the comments below if there's a specific topic you want covered. Once again, thanks for watching. Back to the video. Chapter 2. The wrong source. When you feel like you've run out of things to say, where does your brain go? Well, it goes inwards. You start scanning your own life for something to mention. Topics, stories, opinions. You're searching your own database for fresh material and finding nothing, because you've been there the whole time and it's all old news to you. Meanwhile, the person across from you has just spent the last 2 minutes handing you 4 or 5 different things we could talk about, but you weren't really listening to them. You were too busy looking inside your own head. The shift is this. The source of conversation isn't from you, it's the conversation itself. When someone says, I went away for the weekend, they've just handed you a small pile of threads. Oh, where? With who? Why? What was it like? Did you have a good time? What made you pick that place? Pick any of those questions and you've got a whole new branch of conversation. They didn't mean to give you that. It just falls out of every sentence everyone speaks. Small half-said things that no one wants to follow up on. The trick is just to listen for them. The slightly unusual word, the detail mentioned in passing, the thing they said with a bit of feeling behind it, the half sentence that trailed off because they didn't think you'd be interested. You will be, because that's where the actual conversation wants to go. It's where the interesting topics lie. Someone says, yeah, work's been a bit weird lately. Most people respond with, oh, well, yeah, hope it gets better. And the conversation politely dies in front of you. But, oh, weird, how so? 3 words, and you've got the next 10 minutes sorted. You didn't even have to think of anything. They already told you, you just had to pull the thread. This is why follow-up questions are so disproportionately powerful. They're not really questions, they're invitations to keep going down a path the other person has already opened up. You're not generating content, you're just keeping the door open. So the rule is almost embarrassingly simple. Stop searching your own head for material. Listen to what's already been offered. Conversations don't need fresh material, they need someone who's willing to follow on what's already there. But pulling on a thread, well, that's only half the move. And most people stop after the first tug. The real depth is one more step in. Chapter 3, the depth ladder. This is the counterintuitive idea I mentioned at the start. And the strange thing is, almost everyone's instinct here points exactly the wrong way. When a conversation slows down, well, what's your instinct? For most people, it's to change topics, bring something new in. Oh, by the way, did you see that thing about the assumption being that the current topic has run out of juice, so the only move is to find a fresh one? But this is almost exactly backwards. Most genuinely interesting conversations you've ever had only got interesting because someone refused to change topics when it would have been easier to. They saw an off-ramp, but they didn't take it. They went deeper. Topic bouncing is what shallow conversation looks like. You skim across the surface. Weather, work, weekends, maybe the weather again, and each topic gets about 90 seconds before someone politely substitutes in another one. By the end, you've covered a lot of ground and connected with no one. You've been to 12 countries on a single bus tour and seen none of them. Depth works the opposite way. You start with one thing and keep going down. How's work? Becomes, and what's hard about it? Becomes, well, what would you change about it? Becomes, and what do you actually want to do? Each level requires a slightly braver question than the last, and each one takes you somewhere most conversations never go. Arthur Aaron, a psychologist at Stony Brook, ran a famous experiment in 1997 to test whether closeness could be created on purpose. He gave pairs of strangers a list of 36 questions, arranged in 3 sets, each one slightly more personal than the last. It totaled to about 45 minutes of asking and answering. The pairs, after the study, reported feeling closer than people who'd known each other for years. Some stayed friends, one pair even famously got married. We covered this study in our previous video, How to Be More Interesting. Linked below if you want to watch that. The questions weren't magic, the structure was. You start with easy questions, but you gotta stay on that topic long enough to go down one deeper. The closeness wasn't generated by clever material, it was generated by depth, and on purpose. The practical version of this doesn't require a 36 question list. It requires the willingness to ask second level questions instead of bouncing to a new topic and another first level question. Picture this. A friend mentions, almost in passing, that they've been thinking about leaving their job. Your brain goes, oh wow, that's a big thing and a big topic. I don't want to pry, so maybe you just say, oh wow, that sounds like a lot. 5 minutes later, you're discussing a new restaurant. Your friend is now less likely to bring up the job thing ever again. You declined the invitation for a deeper conversation. You made a small refusal which blocked the conversation where it was going. That instinct to bounce often comes from politeness. You don't want to seem nosy, but what's been making you think that? Isn't an intrusive question, it's a gift. You're telling the other person their experience is worth following further, and most people are quietly delighted when someone does, because almost no one does. It's the difference between digging one well and digging 100 shallow wells. The holes never give you water, the well eventually does. Chapter 4. The silence question. There's one moment that breaks even people who've internalized all of the above, and that's the pause. You've said your bit, they've said theirs, and there's a small silence. And the second it goes on for even slightly too long, your brain decides that this is a catastrophe in progress. The psychologist Namke Codenberg found that in English-speaking conversations, a silence of just 4 seconds is enough to make people feel rejected, anxious, and unsure of their place in the group. 4 seconds. About the length of the time it takes for me to read this very sentence. Your nervous system treats 4 seconds of silence like an actual emergency. What's funny about this is how culturally specific it is. The same researcher found that Japanese speakers tolerated the silence of about 8.2 seconds with no discomfort at all. Same silence, same biology, but twice the tolerance? Whatever's happening in our heads when the pause hits, a lot of it isn't biology, it's habit. The discomfort is something you've learned. A few things help. First, knowing the other person is going through the same thing. They're not just sitting there judging your silences. They're hoping you don't judge theirs. The pause isn't yours to fix alone. Conversation is shared work. It's a two-way street. And that shared silence, well, that's part of the work too. Second, you don't have to fill it cleverly. I lost my train of thought. Well, that's fine. Yeah, look, I'm not really sure what to say. That's also fine. Yeah. Followed by a small, comfortable pause. That's great. Narrating the moment is almost always better than performing a smooth transition you don't feel. Third, and this is the one that most people never quite learn, sometimes the right move is just to let the silence exist. Imagine you're sat in a car at night with a close friend, driving home from an event. Neither of you are saying anything for a few minutes. Nothing was wrong. In fact, it's actually quite pleasant. Now picture the same number of seconds of silence, but it's on a first date. Same silence, same body. Completely different response. The silence didn't change, your interpretation of it did. A comfortable silence isn't a failure of conversation. It's actually the feature of one. And a pause doesn't mean you failed, it means the conversation is breathing and you're both comfortable enough around each other to let it live. So let's bring this all together. You're not running out of things to say, your editor is just rejecting them. Lower the threshold. Use the 3-second rule. Grab what comes to mind before the editor catches up. And that imperfect comment you're so worried about? Research actually shows it makes you more likable, not less. Half the spotlight you feel in yourself isn't there anyway, it's just in your own head. Stop searching inside your mind for material. The other person has already given you the threads. Listen for them. The unusual word, the half-finished thought, the little detail they said with a bit of feeling. Pull on one of those threads. The conversation goes from there completely on its own. When a topic slows down, your instinct to change subjects is actually wrong. Stay. Go one level deeper. What's that like? What's been making you think about that? Dig one well, not hundreds of individual holes. And the conversation pause is not an emergency. 4 seconds feels like 4 hours, but it's just 4 seconds. And the other person is probably also fine, if not thinking the same thing. Narrate it, sit with it, or ask one more question. Comfortable silence is the goal, not the absence of one. Try one of these things in your next conversation. Just one. Pick whichever feels easiest. Use the 3-second rule, maybe ask a second level question, let a pause sit for a bit. Pull on a thread you'd normally let go. Let's see what happens. Probably not much the first time, but the editor learns quickly and habits will start to form. The goal is never to become more interesting. It's to be more interested. Stop performing a conversation and actually just be present in it. If you found this video helpful, consider subscribing for more Calm Explainer content like this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.